Good evening, and thank you for tuning in to this special talk presented by the National Museum of Singapore in commemoration of International Museum Day 2021. My name is Hui Qi, and I'll be the host of today's session. With me today, I have two colleagues who have worked on two special exhibitions that are currently being presented at the National Museum of Singapore. So from left to right, we have Wong Lee Min, who is part of the team working on the Founders Memorial, as well as one of the curators behind Home Truly, Growing Up with Singapore, 1950s to the present. And on her other side, we have Daniel Tham, curatorial lead at the National Museum of Singapore, and one of the curators behind Picturing the Pandemic, a visual record of COVID-19 in Singapore. In today's session, we're going to have the two curators tell us more about the exhibitions they have curated, and you're going to bring exhibitions, following which we'll have a Q&A session. So to the audience watching at home, please do submit your questions to us via Pigeonhole through the link and QR code which should be appearing on screen right now and in the chat as well. So you can submit your questions throughout the presentation, and we'll try. Before I invite the curators to share, I'd like to take a few minutes to introduce the themes of International Museum Day and set the context for this discussion. There's only one slide, so I promise not to talk too much. And you should be seeing the slide on screen now. IMD takes place on 18 May each year, so just 2 days ago. And the theme in 2021 is The Future of Museums, Recover and Reimagine. By the way, the poster and text you're seeing on screen is from the IMD website, so all credit goes to them. I think we can all agree that 2020 was an extraordinary year for all of us, and that everyone had to adapt quickly to all the uncertainty, all the changes, all the challenges brought about by COVID-19. And there was and continues to be a lot of soul-searching and questioning in our society, even up to now. IMD this year calls on museums around the world to rethink our relationships with the communities we serve, to experiment with new forms of cultural experience, and to help construct a just and sustainable future. So with this in mind, we thought it would be a good chance today to discuss our two special exhibitions and find out more about how the museum experience was perhaps rethought, recreated, or reconsidered in the midst of a global pandemic. So I promise not to talk too much, so without further ado, I'd like to hand over the time to Lee Min, who will tell us more about Home Truly.
Hi everyone. Thank you, Hui Qi, for the introduction. And hi to all our online audiences. So my name is Lee Min. I'm one of the curators for the exhibition titled Home Truly, Growing Up with Singapore, from the 1950s to the present. This exhibition is currently on show at the National Museum until 29 August later this year. So let's jump straight into what Home Truly is all about. This exhibition is presented in collaboration with the Straits Times, and we delve into the moments and the experiences in Singapore that the people living here identify with, and in turn shape their identity. People are at the center in the stories that we present. And this means that we try to present the events and the experiences as they were lived and felt by the people. And with this exhibition, we hope to encourage contemplation and dialogue, basically reflection into what our Singapore home means to us. So in terms of the background of Home Truly, we started conceptualizing this exhibition in the wake of the bicentennial towards the end of 2019. And whereas the bicentennial was about the meta-narrative, the long sweep of Singapore's 700-year history, for Home Truly, we wanted to look at our national identity, right, our personal identities from the other spectrum of more intimate as well as micro histories. Right, and in fact, the notion of home at that point in time, right, became more and more foregrounded as COVID-19 unfolded, because more of us started to spend more time at home, and also at the same time when national borders started to close, right, people had to make a decision very quickly. Would they stay or would they leave? And this decision really hinges on a larger decision of where is your home? Where is that safe haven where you want to weather storms in your life? Yep. So with those thoughts in mind, and also with the pandemic, we did have some challenges, which I will go on to talk about later on in this presentation. And that is, how do we go about engaging our visitors in the time of pandemic? And also because Home Truly was developing into a very predominantly visual exhibition with many photographs, we were also challenged to create an exhibition experience for our visually impaired visitors. Right. So, let me start by first bringing you through very quickly what Home Truly is about in terms of its gallery experience. So, Home Truly takes the concept of home as a metaphor to curate the exhibition. So we can say that to build a home, you start with physical structure, for which the foundations are really important, right? And so that is why we titled the first section of our exhibition, Laying the Foundation. And this takes a look at the nation-building developments and policies in Singapore's history. We delve into things like housing, economy, our road to independence, right, infrastructural developments. But we do this from the perspective of the people who are living through these changes in their lives. So, for instance, you can see from the photographs here, we have children learning how to brush their teeth, right, while flicking water at their friends. We have couples who are taking the MRT on its very first day of operation to get to their wedding venue. Right, the second section of our exhibition is titled Moving In. So after having a physical house, a physical structure in place, I guess it is the collective memories, right, and the shared experiences that make a physical house into a home. And that's what we are looking at in this second section. We look at the kind of shared experiences, be it our hawker culture, or the festivals that we have, our school experiences. And this part of the exhibition is done up in various vignettes that evoke memories of these experiences. So for instance, at the top right-hand corner, you can see that this is the subsection that's dedicated to festivals. We have made it into a mock-up living room because this is the living room is usually the shared space that we have when we go and visit our family and friends during festive occasions. Yep. And we also have a replica of a tuck shop in this section of the gallery. And this is actually the first of the 3 chat corners that we have in the exhibition. With these chat corners, we prepared prompts that would generate intergenerational conversations. Right. The third section of the exhibition is titled Living Together. And this is where we look at the more difficult moments that we go through, right? The challenges when it comes to sharing a space that we call home. And in this section, we look at the national campaigns that we have gone through, cleaning and greening of Singapore. We also talk about interracial relations over here. And this is where we present the very heartwarming story of our former national sprinter, Mr. C. Kunalan, who met and married his wife, Madam Chong Yun in the mid-1960s against the backdrop of racial riots in Singapore. The fourth section of the exhibition, titled Open Doors, is modeled after a void deck. Right. And here we present 1-minute video interviews as well as a number of letters, reflection letters, penned by different profiles of people who make up Singapore. Right, and through the interviews as well as the reflections, I would say that we get a very good sense of what home means to these different profiles of people, be it a physical space, or it's a concept, or it's the people, or a place of comfort. Right, and the fifth section is called Sturdy Through Storms. Here we present the different challenges that Singapore faced throughout our years of independence. And in fact, this is the section that is very much developed as COVID-19 unfolded. So when it became clear to us that COVID-19 was fast becoming the crisis of our generation, we wanted to spend more space and time thinking and exploring COVID-19 in our exhibition. Yep, and this was challenging because usually in an exhibition we try to deal with more historical issues and events where there is more time, right, for certain ideas to settle down. Yeah, but now we are dealing with very contemporary issues, right? And with looking at COVID-19, we also wanted to give it a historical aspect, and that is how this whole section, Study Through Storms, came about. We explored the different crises that Singapore has faced over the years, all the way from the 50s till now, and we do realize that in each of these challenges, people of Singapore have united. Yeah. And for the concluding section of our exhibition, this is where we invite visitors to contribute their views and their reflections on what home means to them. So you can see that we have some photographs of the prompt cards over here. Basically, visitors can pick any of the 3 types of prompt cards and respond to the prompts, which are what is home to you? Right, what is one thing that is very precious to you about Singapore that you think should be preserved? And also, what is one area that you think we should work on to make Singapore a better home for us? And after writing or drawing on these prompt cards, then visitors are directed to scan the prompt cards, and it goes up onto that live projection that you see in the photograph. So the prompt cards are on the right, and on the left, immediately after scanning the prompt cards, the words on the cards are digitized, and they go into the word cloud that is in the shape of the map of Singapore. So this word cloud contains 100 of the most frequently used words from the prompt cards of our visitors. Right, so here I have a couple more examples of the prompt cards that we have received. So you can tell that we do get rather attractive illustrations and also very heartfelt and thought-provoking reflections on our island home. So for this, Home Truly is really put together by tapping on rich materials and ideas and experiences from the community, as well as the collections that we have from various institutions. For this part of the presentation, I'll go a bit more into the different materials that we have put together to put together Home Truly, as well as to share with you some of the curatorial considerations. Yeah, so we have quite a number, over 200 archival and contemporary photographs that we show in this exhibition, right? And they are taken mainly from the Straits Times as well as the National Archives. When we choose these photographs, we try to go for those that capture lived experiences as well as convey very strong human emotions. So you see the photograph of the two NS boys, right? Getting their heads shaved before they enter NS. And I think really the expression that they show is I guess the only word that we can really describe is sian, right? Very quintessentially Singaporean. Yeah. And also, as I mentioned, some of the photographs show our lived experiences. So we also have a photograph here of the panic buying, right, that happened when DORSCON Orange was first announced last year. Right, on top of photographs, we have over 80 objects from the National Collection on display in Home Truly. And these objects really add to the stories that we present with the photographs, because a lot of people can remember using these items or at least seeing them, right? So collaterals from national campaigns, the songbook that many generations of children sang to when during school assembly, right? And even some items from the standard issue for NS men. Right. And again, as part of our commitment to foreground people and their perspectives in our stories, we decided to go with less text written by curators. But instead, we combed through the archives as well as we sought out interviews and anecdotes, right, from people. that capture their perspective and their views on the stories we present. And we try to pair these anecdotes and interviews, oral history excerpts, with photographs that we are showing. Right. And besides going to existing materials, existing interviews, we also went forward to seek out new material. So we had this project, the Intergenerational Student Archivist Project, in which the museum trained secondary school and tertiary institution students in techniques of oral history interview before these students went out and interviewed seniors. And we show a couple of these very well done videos of interviews conducted by students in our gallery. Right, and we organized a series of engagement sessions with different groups of people, and their views did inform our exhibition as well for various stages. So for instance, the void deck design that you see in the open door section of the exhibition, the idea actually came from our engagement participants who said that for them, the void deck space really reminded them of HDB life, right? It's very characteristic of living in an HDB block. Yep. And through these engagement sessions, we also managed to get quite a number of rich anecdotes, which are now in large print within the gallery, giving context to the photographs and artifacts that we are showing. So I mentioned earlier that Home truly features over 200 photographs, right? And a quarter of these came from the community, and mainly via an open call for photographs and memories that we conducted via the Straits Times earlier back in 2020, just last year. And this photograph that you see here, contributed by Mr. Ho Kwok Kin, is one of the examples of the treasures that we have, right, lying within the community. So Mr. Ho, he told us that this photograph, which is titled Moving Cargo at the Singapore River, he explained to us that this was taken using a color slide, and that meant that the colors are very well preserved. And this wouldn't have been the case if back in the 1960s, when he took this photograph, if he had used a negative film to take it instead, the colors would not be as vibrant as you see them today. All right, and also last year, the National Museum embarked on a contemporary collecting project on COVID-19 together with the National Library Board. And some of these photographs from our commissioned photographers, as well as the artifacts surfaced by members of the public, are on display in the Study Through Storms section of the exhibition. Yeah. So in fact, one of these artifacts is the face shield that you see in the photograph over here. This face shield was developed by ITE College East, and it had an integrated mellophone design, which made it easier for lecturers to be heard by their students. So this shows the kind of innovations that our society has in times of crises. Right. So coming to pilot initiatives and the innovations that we tried out with Home Truly, I did mention earlier that there was a challenge statement, right, brought forth to the curatorial team, and that is with this very predominantly visual exhibition, right? How are we going to convey the exhibition into an experience for our visually impaired visitors? And so that is how we worked together with Nanyang Polytechnic as well as Guide Dogs Singapore to come up with a pilot exhibition experience for the visually impaired, and this features a prototype smart cane. Right, and this smart cane exhibition experience also comes with a customized audio tour with navigational instructions so that our visitors know exactly where to walk and how much distance to cover. And these tours are also facilitated by our volunteers. And at various stations of the tour, our volunteers would hand out tactile items in the form of 3D replicas of artifacts. So you can see here, we have a Motorola pager from the 70s and 80s, and we also have a Rollei camera from the 70s. Yeah, and so the idea is that with these tactile items, our visually impaired visitors can have a better sense of the items on display. All right, so another challenge that we faced was to curate an engaging and interactive exhibition that was also safe for our visitors during this time of COVID. And we tried to do this by engaging multiple senses in the exhibition while reducing the need for touching items. So, for instance, in the hawker culture section of our exhibition, we use diffuse scents. So instead of having scent station, these scents are being diffused instead in the space. And the scents which we use are again informed by the engagement participants. So our participants did tell us that these are the smells that remind them of a hawker center. So I'm not going to say too much because you can come down to the exhibition and try to smell it. Right. And we also have sound interactives, and so this sound station, it captures the soundtracks of various homegrown talents from the 60s to today. And also I wanted to mention that immediately upon entering the gallery for this exhibition, you will be able to hear a soundscape, right, that provides ambient sound in the gallery. And this soundscape, which we titled A Day in the Life of Singapore, captures characteristic sounds of Singapore from dawn to dusk. So you could hear the very familiar sound of the koel bird, right, and also other sounds that make up life in Singapore, the soundtrack of life in Singapore. And another thing that we tried to do was to introduce mediated touch, right? So each visitor who comes to the exhibition is issued with a multi-purpose pen. This pen has a pen tip for writing on prompt cards. It also has a stylus tip for interaction with the touch screens, in which there's a lot of additional content and AV material being parked in there. And also this pen comes with a RFID tag. And this is something new that we are trying with this exhibition, right? And so we have a number of prompts throughout the entire exhibition that's crafted to be aligned with the exhibition content. And our visitors can then respond to these prompts by tapping the RFID tag on the stations. Right, and so we hope that this is a way to engage and to interact with our visitors. Right, and of course, I mean, now with COVID and reduced physical attendance in museums, visitorship in museums, we developed a digital experience at home truly. And please scan the QR code and check out our digital experience. I would say that what's important about this digital experience for us is that right from the get-go, we were very sure that we wanted this digital experience to be different from a gallery experience. So it would not be a digitization of the physical exhibition. We thought hard about what was so different about the digital medium that allows for a different experience, right? And so the content that we introduce is new, yet complementary to what is in the physical gallery. And we also have all these interactive quizzes, as well as the illustrations that you see on screen. And for each chapter of our digital experience, we work with a local artist to introduce these illustrations. Okay, and well, the spirit of Home Truly as an exhibition is a people-centered one. And even in the way that stories are told or the way that stories are being gathered, we try to be people-centered. So we are happy to say that some of these photographs and the oral histories that we introduce forge ties across the physical sphere as well as the digital sphere. We have people who recognize themselves, their family and their friends in the photographs and oral histories. And even on the digital sphere, one of our posts on the wedding couple on the MRT train, it went viral and it was picked up by various online platforms. Right. And an important part of an exhibition is programming. So in our programming, we reach out to visitors with various needs. Right, and so on screen you can see that we have Zoom tours for seniors, and many of these seniors are they are in mild stages of dementia, right? But the conversational tours that we have, right, does give them the opportunity to recount their life, right, based on the old artifacts as well as the photographs that they see. Right, and also we do seek to have our programming to spark conversations on contemporary issues as well, such as sustainability. So if we take a look at the kind of feedback that we have received from our visitors, many of our respondents, they feel that the exhibition content resonated with them, and it also gave them a conversation starter across generations, right? And the multisensorial approach, right, our sense station, did make a difference. And in terms of our digital features, the RFID mechanism that we are using, right, it was praised for its effectiveness, especially for the safety that it afforded visitors in this time of COVID-19. And definitely the kind of digital features that we have here, the wireless interactivity with RFID, as well as the live projection, they are currently being explored for upcoming NHB exhibitions. And our visually impaired visitors also find that definitely there is a huge difference with the Smart Cane tour that allows them to explore the exhibition much more independently than before. Right, so for additional content as well as more information on the behind the scenes of the exhibition, do check out our Home Truly publication, and we also have attractive discounts available. Right, yeah, so thank you very much for staying through with me in this presentation, and it is definitely our hope that Home Truly will be part of this ongoing conversation on our home, right, Singapore as our home, and it will continue to bring about efforts to work with the community to share and present our shared stories. Thank you.
Thank you, Lim, for that interesting presentation. We actually have a few questions coming in already, but let's hold them until the end. So for now, let's invite Daniel to tell us more about picturing the pandemic.
Thanks so much, Hui Ti. My name is Daniel, and I'm part of the curatorial team that put together the exhibition Picturing the Pandemic, a visual record of COVID-19 in Singapore. So that's an exhibition that is running concurrently and actually next door to the Home Truly exhibition. And it will be great for all our visitors to come and see both exhibitions together when you visit the National Museum. Today I'll be running through with us the process of putting this exhibition together, how it all started, and some of the considerations that we made in doing this, and I think I'll just actually head straight into that by talking about the Collecting Contemporary Singapore initiative. Lee Min mentioned that earlier as something that the National Museum had been thinking about for a while. For me, as a curator, I have generally been dealing with colonial period artifacts, for example, but I think it was really during the pandemic and with most of us working from home, we started thinking very hard about what it means for us as a museum to be collecting the contemporary, to be documenting the contemporary with things that are happening around us, and in particular, how do we document and collect the pandemic itself? So what you see on this slide are some of the things that we received from the public when we did an open call that invited the public to share objects that that meant something to them during the pandemic, and that helps to document their experiences of it. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But something else that we launched ourselves to start doing right away was to do a commission project. You see the faces of a group of very, very talented photographers and filmmakers. And what we wanted to do in this case was to document how the pandemic looked like. And just now I mentioned, when we were all stuck at home, I think our experiences of the pandemic was tended to be a little bit more narrow. It's confined to our own individual experiences. but as a museum, I think we really wanted to get a good sense of how Singapore was experiencing it, the different diverse individuals and communities. How was everyone coping with the pandemic in different ways? So that was really foremost on our minds when we decided to commission our photographers, and you can see here from left, Bob Lee, Brian Teo, Edwin Koo, Hao Hui Yang, and Zakaria Zaino, and a pair of filmmakers, Dave Lim and Ada Ng, to really document for us how Singapore went through the pandemic. And this is actually from this slide over here, you can see some of the photographs that were submitted to us. We wanted the photographers to submit stories. In other words, not just individual photos, but to work around specific stories, whether it's a story of a particular individual or a family or an event or a particular theme. And I think what you can see here is a nice variety of styles as well. Everything from portraiture to street photography, something that's a bit more spontaneous, to documentary and photojournalistic approaches to telling the story. So I think there was a good diversity there as well. And for us, that was really the start of putting together this commission project. If you all recall, it was in June where we came out of the circuit breaker and entered into phase one, where things started relaxing a little bit. And within the team, we decided that, so far we've been doing photographs, why don't we commission a film as well? And we thought a film would be a nice complement to the still images that were being taken, and also to start capturing Singapore as it started to open up again, as it started to recover, as activity started to resume. How did that look like? So it was with that in mind that we commissioned Ada Ng and Dave Lim to do a short film. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later too. And things happen. The general elections were announced, and in the later part of June, and we were going to have a GE right in the middle of a pandemic in July. And again, we felt that that was something that was important to document. So we got two of the photographers, Edwin and Brian, to cover the elections. But to focus on something a little bit more specific, how exactly the elections were different from all our other elections, held during a pandemic, with the different kinds of restrictions that were in place. How did the different candidates, for example, still try to establish some kind of connection with the voters, and of course, again, as with the visual record, how did that look like? So these were the different components of the commission, and I think you can see how things sort of developed along the way. But I would say as things came together, we became more and more, I would say, convinced that it was important to put out an exhibition around this content sooner than later. So this is also quite different from how we usually do things. Usually we have a longer runway to do an exhibition. In this case, we had a couple of months to put this together. So that's something different. And I would say trying to curate an exhibition during the pandemic has its own challenges as well. Most of us were still largely working from home. I would say almost all our meetings took place via Zoom and Skype. And so that was quite a different experience too. But something else was different too. In this case, because of the short timeline, but also because all of us really wanted to be aligned together on this. This was an exhibition that was curated by the entire team. Everyone else, I think you can imagine, all hands were on deck. we curated different parts together, and the images here just give you a sense of some of the working diagrams that show the process of putting the exhibition together. And I would say that it's quite different working remotely, but I think everyone really adapted to it quite quickly. And here, from this point, I thought to run through the different sections of the exhibition. I would, of course, invite you to come and see it for yourself, but I thought to just reflect on some of the things that we had in mind when we put them together. We start off the exhibition with a section called A Day in the Life. These are largely biographical stories, and Lee Min earlier was talking about how people are at the center, and I would say that's very much what resonates with us as well. We wanted to place the stories of people right at the start, and we felt that would be a very accessible way to enter into the exhibition. The images that you see here, the first one that you see is actually of a nurse who is taking a break from the end of a long afternoon shift. And I think that really sets the tone for the whole exhibition. It wasn't a very so-called heroic or dramatic image. It was a behind-the-scenes one. And we wanted to convey through the photographs here what goes on behind the scenes, what goes on in the day in the life of a frontline nurse, for example. And in the next slide over here, you see different aspects of a day in the life. On the top row, you see Brian Teo's series on that captures a child's home-based learning experience, and this is a very personal and very intimate story that looks at the joys, but also the challenges of home-based learning. All of us are back into that kind of arrangement again now. The series at the bottom is by Hao Hui Yang, and it's slightly different because it shows the day in the life of a hospital. In this case, Bright Vision Hospital, which was a community hospital converted to focus just on COVID-19 patients. And here you see the day in the life, from registration of the patients to the daily exercises that they do, and a very, very heartwarming practice of the patients being discharged, being cheered on by the staff. The next section is called Essential Workers, and it's a section that allows us to ask that question. What is essential and who is essential? That became a very big talking point during the pandemic. And here we have a variety of different kinds of images that talk about that. You have lots of portraiture, in this case by Bob Lee. And he had a whole series of portraits of different people involved in essential work that he titled Unsung Heroes. And what I really like about that series is how each portrait tells the story on its own. It's quite, it says it all, but at the same time, it's accompanied by handwritten accounts by each of the workers reflecting on their own experiences working during the pandemic. Bob did another series on hawkers, and the way he approached that was to pair his portraits of the hawkers holding their tapao containers with the empty seats at the hawker centers that they were working at, and I would say that has also become a familiar sight to all of us again. The next section is called New Ways of Living. And this is where we reflect on how our lives have changed and what that looks like again. You will see the images here by Zakaria Zainal, and the image on top is from his series called A Reclusive Ramadan. And he did another series called Keeping the Faith. And these are series that look at the experiences of the Muslim community observing Ramadan during the pandemic, something that's totally unprecedented. And at the same time, for the different religious groups in Singapore, how they adapted in different ways to worship and devotion during the pandemic, and often through the use of technology. I won't show more from Zachariah's series, but I really do invite you to join us on Saturday at 1 p.m. and where Zachariah will be sharing more about his experience putting this series together. There are two series that I wanted to talk about from this section. It's the one on top, actually not on top, to the left by Brian Teo called Mask Up, and to the right by Hao Hui Yang called Spaces. And these are very different kinds of photos. They give you a very visual sense of how our urban landscape has changed dramatically. Brian's photos focus on how the mask features prominently in our everyday life, and Hui Yang's on how our spaces have been reconfigured and hauntingly so. The last section is called Making Visible, and it's something that we wanted to focus on through the whole exhibition, but we wanted to focus on it particularly here, how the pandemic brings to light the stories of different communities that otherwise might not have their voices heard as much. So the curators for this section opened the section using portraits from different series, and I really like that because it puts a face to the topic that we're talking about, and it really introduces you to the different individuals, to see them as people rather than a topic or a theme. And we have two series over here, one by Edwin Koo on the top row that looks at foreign worker housing, how the foreign workers were accommodated in different ways. And the series at the bottom by Zachariah Zaino on, in this case it's called Deliver, and it's focused on Zulkifli Adnawi, who's a retired cleaner who actually went around his estate to do groceries, to do a grocery run for underprivileged families. So we really wanted to both highlight stories of different communities, but also of what different Singaporeans were doing in making things better. And we felt that it was really important to have that more uplifting messaging as well. And all that comes together with the film. And actually, as you walk through the exhibition, you see glimpses of the film, you hear parts of the soundscape, but eventually you step in and you can watch this film. It's I would say it's very much a visual ethnographic film. There isn't a narration, but you just see scene after scene, and it really dialogues very well with the different themes and the stories that you see in the photographs. I haven't talked about multimedia content yet, but through the exhibition, we have different kiosks that feature the different conversations that we as curators had with the photographers and with some of the subjects. And I would say the photographs really speak for themselves. It's really powerful, but we wanted to have the different voices to be featured as well. So we have these on different kiosks, and I would say it's quite a different experience again, because in many cases when we came to the studio to shoot these videos, it was the first time that many of us were meeting face to face. So many of our meetings were over Zoom, for example. We have a chat bot as well, where a lot of audio content is administered. For example, audio by the different photographers introducing the stories that they had, and some oral histories too. So we were quite deliberate in keeping the multimedia content quite minimal, and for it to be audio so that it complements the images that you see in the exhibition. We end off with the physical. Through the whole thing, these were mainly digital images, and we move from a physical from a visual to a physical record. And some of the objects that you see at the start of my presentation, they are on display here in the showcase. And I have a picture here of myself meeting some of the donors. Again, this was the first time I got to meet them face to face. We had a one-day preview for the donors to come and see the exhibition, and I have no idea how people look like. So I was going up to people and saying, who are you? And sort of striking conversations from there and getting to know them. So it was quite an interesting experience, I would say. And the image on the right is that of it's a wall of objects that were contributed by our own staff, our own museum staff and volunteers on objects that we all felt represented our experience of the pandemic. I'm not sure if you can see it, but there's a pair of headphones over there that I contributed, and for me, the headphones became quite an important part of my own daily life, being involved in these Zoom and Skype meetings every day. And lastly, I won't go through too much for every single response, but the kind of visitor responses that we got were very encouraging. At the end of the exhibition, we invited people to write in to share with us which stories resonated with them, and also to give us an idea on what we should be collecting as a museum. We wanted to keep that question open. The responses that we got were encouraging in the sense that a lot of people resonated with it. I think that it was quite an emotional experience for many of them. And they identified with the stories, and that was something that we wanted to achieve. We wanted the images to really connect with people, but we also wanted the exhibition to help people see a different side that they may not have seen or may not have experienced. And I think you can see from some of the responses here that the exhibition really helped people see a different side as well. So that was encouraging, and to hear from everyone on what we should be collecting, what we should be focusing on, and I think for us as a museum, that really speaks about the kind of conversations. We're back to that word again, conversations. The conversations that we want to continue having with the public, and to, I think, as we think about what it means to collect the contemporary, this very much needs to be a two-way conversation on how that will happen and how that will look like. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks very much, Daniel, and to Limit as well for your very interesting presentation. So I think there's a lot to unpack there. I'm going to go straight to the Q&A. So for the audience at home, feel free to continue submitting your questions. We will try as far as where we can. Okay. So I think in both of your presentations, we really see the kind of shift in the ways of working, the ways of thinking, and how to present museum content and museum experiences. And we also saw a lot of the challenges that you faced working during COVID as well. So this leads nicely into one of the questions asked by the audience. What was the biggest challenge you faced working on the exhibitions in 2020? So anyone can feel free to go ahead first if you have something that jumps out in your mind.
Well, I would say one of the biggest challenge of doing an exhibition about the pandemic was doing so in the midst of a pandemic itself. So of course, everyone has different personal challenges, sort of working from home, trying to develop a new system of working with each other. We are so used to meeting together, sitting at the table and doing things. So it definitely involved sort of pivoting to a new way of doing things. I would say the restrictions on physical installation that would definitely be a big challenge as well. But I would say curatorially as well, doing an exhibition on the pandemic while it's happening was a very, very new experience. So it's in a sense easier to do something about, let's say, an event that happened 100 years ago. You have that luxury of hindsight. You've been able to reflect and see how different people have responded to the event, and then you're able to sort of have that kind of distance. But I would say it's a little bit more challenging going through the event and presenting it at the same time.
Yeah, I think adding on to what Daniel has said, indeed, for the Study Through Storm section of Home Truly, where we looked at COVID-19, that was a challenging section for us because we had to think about what were some things that would remain relevant, right, when the exhibition opens and continue being relevant during the exhibition run, right? And we also had to put in place certain considerations such as the flexibility of the gallery space. Let's say if something else pops up throughout the exhibition, how can we quickly adapt our exhibition space to tell that story? And for that, we would say that we thought of the showcase as a possible place for this flexibility. So at any time when there are new interesting artifacts coming in through the contemporary collecting, we are ready to reinstall the things in our showcase. Right, and I guess for us, the greatest curatorial challenge while working during the pandemic is really how to go about continuing being interactive and engaging our audiences through various means. And for that, the solution that we tried out was the RFID tag. Yeah, and that was a new experience for us because when we were crafting these RFID prompts and the kind of responses, right, we had to think about how to make these prompts relevant, and also what were the kind of ideas or stories in which we want to test our visitors' responses to. So that was something that we had to think through quite a lot. Yeah.
Okay. Let's hold the thought about the discussion on the RFID and technology. And to go back to the idea of collecting the contemporary, I think that's something that pretty unique that came out very strongly in both of your presentations about collecting the contemporary and how this was a completely new thing for the museum as well. And both of you mentioned that, normally for exhibitions that we do at the museum, there is that historical distance. And maybe even in the study of history, traditionally, you always study from a distance. So now that it's so close to you, you are actually presenting something that is happening now. Was that very difficult? Like, what are the considerations of what kind of stories, what kind of things you are presenting, considering how it's something that's really impacting people in the present day as well?
I would say that, I mentioned it being a challenge because, you don't have that distance.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you can turn it to your advantage. Memories are fresh, objects are still available, and it's out there to be captured. You are able to speak to people and actually get their stories and get their accounts of it in a socially distanced way, perhaps through Zoom and all. Technology really helps in this case. But I think that's really at the heart of what we wanted to do through contemporary collecting. I think we found that as we look through our collections through the years, sometimes there's always a kind of sense that, we don't have enough material about this event or that event. If only at that time we were able to collect. If only at that time we were able to talk to people and get their stories. So I think with doing it now, we are able to fill in those gaps before they disappear.
So the advantages of collecting in the contemporary as well. And Dimi, you mentioned that you actually kept the showcases very flexible so that you could really swap in something that was interesting that came out suddenly. So I think there's that dynamic element of having contemporary objects in the exhibition as well. Do you have any example of like something that you really just like last minute swapped in because it came in? Since you mentioned it.
Yeah. I mean, well, we do have a set of masks that were used in the wedding of our colleague.
Yes.
Yeah. So we have a colleague who just got married. I believe that was after circuit breaker. Maybe it was.
I think just after, in June.
Yeah, that's
that.
right. Yeah.
Shout out to our colleague if he's watching this.
Yeah, a shout out to our colleague. Indeed. Yeah. So that is an example of an item that is really fresh, right? From the community, and also we had customized masks that was sewn on by this great grandmother. Yeah, for the various generations at home. So I think. Indeed, when it comes to contemporary collecting and dealing with contemporary issues, it is very key to stay attuned to developments so that you can adapt quickly and also to feel the pulse of the community. And for that, I felt that our Collecting Contemporary project, because we were listening to the community and getting items from them, so that really helped us to stay relevant and to move together with developments.
I'm actually reminded of the vial of the first dose of the vaccine that was administered. So I mean that was something that you couldn't quite plan for in advance. But when it happened, we were very fortunate to be able to collect that from the Ministry of Health and very very quickly included that in our plan. So you can see that in the showcase as well.
Okay, so I mean. On the same topic of collecting the contemporary, I think also, again, both exhibitions touch on social issues that are taking place in the present that might still be a bit sensitive, that we are still in the midst of considering or discussing. This actually links to a question asked by one of our audience at home. And they asked that the museum is starting to focus on contemporary issues where traditionally it has been a space for collating historical events. And the question they asked is, why do museums need to do this? Shouldn't it be done by citizen engagement instead? Right? What is the role of museums in collecting the contemporary or discussing contemporary issues? A challenging question, but perhaps like some of the background behind the whole idea of this initiative in the first place.
I think there are obviously lots of different opinions and debates over what the role of a museum is. For us, being closed as a museum during the circuit breaker last year, I think it was quite it was an existential kind of experience. It's like, our museum is closed. What does that mean for us? What is our relevance and what is our role? I would say that made us think about such issues more. But I would say any museum, regardless of the area of collecting or the kind of focus that the museum has, I think every museum wants to be able to connect well with its audiences, and I think an important aspect of connecting would be to help visitors see the connection between history with the present. I mean, I wouldn't say that there are always clear-cut parallels, but I think where we are today and what we are going through is part of that line of history, and I think it is important as museums to help people make that connection. And I would say on top of that, the museum does play an important public and social role. Of course, there are other places that can do that, but I think there is a specific role that history plays. And the acts of documenting and collecting, these are actions that play a very important role in involving people, in helping people to talk and to share, and helping these stories to be spread in a meaningful way.
I echo what Daniel has said. Indeed, I think that museums are cultural actors, right? We do have a role to play in helping our audiences see that whatever we are presenting remains relevant to them. And I think especially when it came to the topic of home truly, right? The notions of home and all that, it is quite difficult to just present a historical view and then I guess our visitors will be left with like, this disjunction between what was in the past and the kind of lives that they are living, they're leading now, right? I mean, to enter a museum, you are obviously from the world outside of the museum and you are totally in touch with contemporary issues, and to come in and just see the historical aspect and to go out again to face the contemporary living world, we cannot leave our audiences with this kind of disjunction. I think as a cultural actor, it is within our means, our responsibility as well to bridge all these. Yeah.
Actually, I think what you did with Study Through Storms is a good example of that, right? I mean, with what we are going through in the pandemic now, but seen in light of a longer history of the different kinds of crises that we've gone through together as a country.
I think this is really going to the role of the museum, and I like what Daniel said about this connection and about not having that disjuncture between what you see about Singapore's history and your own lived experience in the present day as well. So I mean, just a callback as well to the themes of IMD. You notice they do mention the sort of the role of the museum in creating the society we want to see, a just and sustainable future. So I think museums perhaps all around the world are kind of looking in that direction as well, thinking about contemporary, about present day issues, not just historical. Okay, and there is a question from another member of the audience, whether there are plans to continue documenting Singapore's experiences in the present day. So the Collecting the Contemporary initiative is still ongoing?
Definitely. Mm-hmm. So I would say because we are going through the pandemic now, that is definitely a focus of ours. I mean, who knows what would happen next, and as a museum, I think we would definitely want to be quick and adaptable to collect the next big event, so to speak. But I would say apart from that, we want to be collecting types of objects that are reflective of contemporary life. So as a museum, we've always been focusing on social history, objects that are perhaps seemingly ordinary, but at the same time they help to tell the story of how people live and what their experiences and worldviews are through the years. And it's very important for us to extend that to the present, the contemporary. So for example, what is the role of technology today in our lives? And that's something that we as a museum want to continue to focus on as well in documenting and in collecting.
So, I mean, for the benefit of the audience at home, do you want to just share like how can they continue like sharing their artifacts or stories of COVID-19?
Oh, of course. If you come to our National Museum website, you can look for the page on Collecting Contemporary Singapore, where you can actually make a submission to us to share an image of an object that you feel is important and significant to your experience of the pandemic. And we will be very happy to get in touch with you to explore more. So, I mean, for us, the object is important, but quite crucially, the story behind it is what we are very interested in.
Okay, for those watching, if you are inspired by this discussion and you actually have a story or an object you want to share, this is how you can actually tell us more about it. Okay, so moving on, let's move on to a different topic. Another thread I think that came out in both of your presentations was about digitization and the use of perhaps like digital interventions to sort of bridge like the realities of COVID-19 and to make the experience safe for people. We actually had a question from one of the audience who asked that they said they have noticed a trend of digital elements and like using digital tools to explore heritage. And they asked whether this trend is actually prompted by COVID-19 or whether it was something that we were already embarking on before COVID-19.
I would say that it is something that we were already embarking on prior to COVID-19, but definitely COVID-19 accelerated all these developments. I think it was really with COVID-19 unfolding that the Home Truly team started to think very seriously about using the RFID as a wireless interactive layer to engage our visitors. Yep, and we did see that with this introduction, it helped us in a sense that we could bring in other forms of interactivity and make it engaging in a way that that would not have been possible if we did not go this kind of digital method, right? So for instance, with the RFID layer at the end of the entire exhibition experience, upon checking out their RFID tag, our visitors would get a personalized, customized list of links to check out, right? Based on their responses throughout the entire experience. Yeah, and also, I mean, with the digital experience that I spoke about earlier, we were able to weave in other content as well as stories that we weren't able to do so because of space constraints within the gallery. I mean, curators always have so much to say, then there's the physical space limitation, right? Yeah, so I thought that these are indeed, they are in place, but with the acceleration of digitization and digital media during COVID-19, it did give us greater room for creativity. Yeah.
I think Li-Min mentioned about interactivity, and I think that's something that we as museums, from a visitor experience point of view, we are always looking at different ways in which we can engage our visitors. There are lots of beautiful things that people can look at and appreciate when they come to our museums. But at the same time, how do we engage them further? How do we interact with them? So, I mean, that can be through physical touch, something a lot more tactile. In today's climate, not so possible anymore. And I think that has sort of accelerated the move towards more digital formats for interactivity. And even then, we are constantly trying to find new ways of doing things and that avoid touch. So touch screens are difficult. In the Picturing the Pandemic exhibition, what would ordinarily have been a touch screen or videos that are activated by buttons, now we have them on a loop, so people don't have to touch them. And a lot more of the audio content that would normally be handheld, we administer through our chatbot, and that's something that people can access through their mobile phones on their own. So I think it's digital is a useful platform for us to interact, but I think we are constantly trying to find ways that work, especially with the present circumstance.
And this actually brings me to a question. Okay, this question is from me, not from the audience. I mean, seeing as, like the challenges of interactivity in the COVID-19 world, and the fact that all these digital interventions exist, and that a lot of programs and events have actually moved online. Actually, what do you think is the relevance and the value of a physical exhibition in this, like, I want to say post-pandemic, but we're not post yet. So in this world where we have COVID-19 considerations, is there still value, or is there something to be said about going online and presenting maybe a completely digital experience instead?
Well,
no, go ahead.
Okay. I guess there's definitely still space to come. I mean, there is still appeal in physically visiting a museum. I was reading elsewhere that actually some institutions, some museums, they have realized that all these digital offerings have indeed whet the appetite for more visitors to come down physically to the museum. So I would say that in terms of physical offerings and visitorship, yes, it's probably still here to stay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess this has to do with the kind of three-dimensionality that comes with a visit. Right? It's different from a screen where everything is just 2D. There are interactions that you have with the environment, with the people around you when you are in a physical gallery, right? Perhaps sometimes there are multisensory items around, right? Things that require touch, or perhaps things that don't require touch, but sounds, right, or sense that you can't really experience just via a screen. So there's still appeal, I guess. Mm.
Yeah. I think so too. And if you're talking about things like online exhibitions, that's something that has been done for quite a while, even before the pandemic. And I think there's an important place for that, because it's a way in which you can really share what you have in your collections and what you might not be able to put together in one place so easily, but you're able to actually reach a very wide and international audience. But I would say the pandemic has really sort of emphasized to all of us the yearning that we all have for physical experiences, actually. And people want to meet other people face to face. People want to go to a physical space rather than to just look at a screen. And I think for exhibitions in particular, there is definitely value in telling a story in a three-dimensional space. I mean, for picturing the pandemic, the images and the film that you see, these are all digital images. So we could very well have decided to just do a digital and online exhibition, so to speak. But I think working with a physical space was in fact quite exciting and very liberating for the curators, because in this case you are dealing with digital images that could be presented in almost any way possible. And I think you can see that in the exhibition. You know, we've tried to use different formats, whether it's through light boxes, whether it's through projections, whether it's through physical print on different kinds of media, and that really allowed the character and the personality of each different story to shine through in a different way. So I think physical is definitely here to stay, and I think increasingly we are really exploring how the physical and the digital can sort of coexist and really complement each other.
I think it's interesting. We kind of see this trend where even before COVID, we were moving towards digital, but then COVID-19 sped up that move. And then because we are stuck with only doing digital, then there is that yearning to go back to the physical as well. So there's the kind of tension. And then now we're trying to see how we can blend the two together to have a safe physical experience that's mediated through technology or digital interventions. Okay, I'm quite mindful of time because we are slightly over. But there's one more issue that I wanted to bring up, because there were two questions related to this. This is actually directed for Home Truly at the beginning, but I think it's actually relevant to both exhibitions. With both exhibitions really having a lot of stories and from the community and artifacts, stories, pictures from the community. How does the curatorial team actually decide like what goes into the exhibition? And how do you ensure that a wide variety of voices are incorporated in the exhibition? Yeah, so this can be for both of you. I think it's quite relevant.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, definitely it comes to a point where there must be a curatorial decision to be made about what are the things to include, what are the things to have to exclude, unfortunately, and what are the things to prioritize, right? And what are the things to just mention in passing. So no matter which exhibition you work on, there's bound to be this kind of really a dilemma, right, for everyone to manage. And I think for us, thankfully, we have the digital experience, so there are ways for us to also get these stories out. For the items, for the stories in the gallery, it was really, we had to think about what the community was saying, what was important for them. And sometimes this also shaped the kind of stories and the emphasis that we have in the gallery. So we are open to listening. And at the end of the day, we also ask ourselves, how do the content we want to present gel with our objectives of the exhibition, right? Which is to have a people-centered exhibition, but also to encourage contemplation and dialogue about our home. So these are all the considerations that we have in mind.
If I could share the process for picturing the pandemic, it was really after we received the different stories that were submitted by the photographers that we looked at all of that as a whole and tried to draw out the main themes that were evident from these stories. So that really formed the backbone of the main sections that you see in the exhibition, and the kind of journey that we bring our visitors through. So I would say that larger storyline is very much a thematic one, and one that is quite scripted in that way. But within each of the sections, then we were very mindful to let the stories speak for themselves. So we share the same dilemma. We want to show everything. Everything is good in that sense. But I think the priority of telling a strong and compelling story shaped the way we edited as well. Sometimes less is more, and sometimes by not crowding the screen or not crowding the space with too much, can actually bring forth a stronger emotion or a stronger experience. So that's something that we definitely think about a lot when we select and as we edit, and at the same time bearing in mind, do we have a good representation? Do we have there's no easy answer. But I think it really does go back to, I think, what Lee Min has shared earlier, and what I mentioned a little bit too, the importance of having conversations. And I think for all of us as curators, we recognize that we can't just make an exhibition on our own, in our heads, and not talk to anyone. It would be a very, very different kind of exhibition. Maybe it might reflect how I think and how I see things, but if we want to make exhibitions that resonate with people and that capture the experiences of the people, then these conversations are just so important.
Yeah, I really like that Lee Min mentioned the openness to listening, and then Daniel mentioned the conversation. So really that process of the audience and the curators, not the audience, but the contributors, the audience sort of like interacting with each other and having the chance to share their thoughts, their opinions, their experiences. Okay, with that, I think this is a nice wrap-up because we are quite over time. Sorry for overrunning. Thank you very much to Daniel and to Lee Min for the very, very interesting discussion that we had about the two exhibitions. So to the audience at home, please do visit our two exhibitions if you have not yet. They are ongoing until the end of August, and they're located right beside each other in the basement level of the National Museum. So you can actually visit two in one go, like two for one due. So please do visit if you have a bit of time. And thank you very much for staying with us all the way until 8:50 p.m. here at the National Museum. Thanks for tuning in, and goodbye, good night.